Welcome to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, where all things football are injected right to your veins, with your hosts, Matt Donnelly, Calvin Shoemake, and Jeff Mueller.
What is up, and welcome to a very special edition of the Dynasty Vipers Team Spotlight Series. I am excited to be joined by some amazing guests here today. Before we get into the guest, I just want to add a little bit of information about what we're doing here. Yeah, we fumbled a little bit of the intro, but we're fine. Today, we are going through a pretty important team in the last couple of decades, the New England Patriots. Pretty good bit of history there. But why are we doing this? Because in Dynasty football, we need to understand not just the rookies that are coming into the draft and things like that, but we need to understand the systems, the processes that they find themselves in, and nothing says systems and processes quite like the Patriot way. But before we get into this team, I want to make sure that I introduced our special panel. And Faith, I want to start with you. Just tell everybody who you are and where we can find your work.
Hello. I am Faith. I am part of the team over at Club Fantasy, which is at Club Fantasy FFL. I'm one of the editors over there. I have written one piece in my entire lifetime. It was actually Dynasty based. I thought it was good. I may have to revive it for the 2021 season. You can also follow part of the Club Fantasy family, which is at the Speakeasy FF. It's a continuation of our Women in Fantasy Football event that we did last year that we will be doing again this year. And you won't want to miss our next episode. That'll be out right after the Super Bowl with the one and only Lynn Dellians.
Oh, I'm actually, Linda is going to be on with me in about an hour. We're going to be doing the Broncos. So excited to hear about that. Mike, I think, a lot of people know you. You've been doing some really big things. Tell everybody kind of what you've been working on, what's been exciting going on for you guys, because it's been a lot.
Yeah, so I'm at Fantasy Intervention. Obviously, join our circle _ Oh man, I am just trying to keep up with that group. As Bob can tell you, the live chat is pretty much a full-time job in and of itself. When I get off of this show, there'll be 475 unread messages that I have no intention of reading. So any of you watching, just know I'm not a scroller. If it's not on the screen, I ain't reading it.
Exactly.
But yeah, we're up to now. Man, I want to say the team's about 40 strong. And we're pumping out articles literally on every medium. The articles are coming out. We have quick shots. We have now one of my favorite things that DJ is doing, which is called Taste Testers, where he's actually teaching you how to mix drinks while teaching about fantasy football, which is basically the perfect combination for what we're doing. We're doing bar fights, which is people arguing opposite sides. We've launched one about DeAndre Swift. Next one coming out, Carson Wentz. And obviously, you can find one of us live streaming pretty much at every time. I always say we're like Friends, that sitcom where if you turn on your television, Friends is on somewhere. If you click on a live stream, I can assure you someone from Join Our Circle is live at that point, including our resident Dolphins fan, Troy King, who obviously just went live with Matthew Berry and is going to enjoy talking about the playoffs because he doesn't get to experience it very often. So I'm pretty stoked to give him that experience today.
I think he just announced that he's having Taylor Swift on his podcast next. So
that sounds about right without the rocket ship he's been on.
Bob, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Not much. How are you doing?
What are you not working on these days?
Well, my real work?
No, I know you got a lot of things. You are.
No, I'm not doing any of my real work. All I'm doing is fancy football stuff.
Nice.
So I'm obviously doing stuff with the Vipers and Join Our Circle and doing sending out some tweets on Dynasty Trade Calculator. Got a new podcast started with John Bosch, the Dynasty Time Machine. And I think that should be enough.
You probably named like, I don't know, 2% of what you're really working on right there. You really are. People don't understand how much they see your work because they don't necessarily always understand that you're the one doing it. But basically, if you've ever enjoyed a graphic on Twitter, Bob might have had something to do with it. So pumped to have you on here to talk about the Patriots. Pumped to have all you guys to talk about the Patriots because that's exactly, when we think about these teams, we don't want to just talk to fantasy people. You guys are really smart. You know football, you know fantasy, all that. But you also, the Patriots. And no one knows your team quite the way you do. And somebody that you are very familiar with has a pretty important game coming up this weekend. And so I think we have to start there. I tried to put this into context for me as a Saints fan. And obviously, we spent a lot of time here with Drew Brees and trying to think about him like going to another team and then ultimately going to the Super Bowl. But I thought, I don't even know if it's quite a comparison. You guys spend so much time with Tom Brady. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of animosity there. Tell me what it's like kind of being a Patriot, or maybe there is. Faith, tell me what's going on right there in your head.
There's so much going on in my head right now. Listen, there's no denying that Tom Brady is amazing. There's no denying that he's great. I mean, he's in his 40s and he's going back to another Super Bowl. He's fantastic at what he does. The fact that he did it the year after leaving the Patriots, that's what hurts. Like, I could give him a year or two, and he took one of the worst teams in the league, too. I'm like, I love you, but it hurts right now.
Mike, what do you think? You agree?
No. I mean, this is what I wanted. When he left, I wanted one of the two teams to go to the Super Bowl. So maybe I'm different as a Patriots fan. Number one, I wanted him to leave. I felt like the story was written, and the only cool plot twist was him leaving. And I wanted one of the two teams to go. And I will say that when I watched the Seattle game earlier in the year, prior to Cam Newton getting sick, I honestly thought it was going to be us. That was a spectacular game. They looked like the Patriots. They looked solid. Cam Newton looked like a rock star. I was like, all right, this is us. And I believe at that point I compared the Bucs to the early 2000s Washington teams with Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders, a bunch of over-the-hill names that are never going to get it together. I didn't delete that tweet. You can find it. It's embarrassing, but I've said dumber things, so whatever. Deal with it. So realistically, what I wanted was the end of the story. Like, I wanted one of them to go on, because now what it brings me is to 2021, where I am amped about an angry, embarrassed Bill Belichick trying to come back and doing something with him. That's why I'm so stoked to get into the season preview, because I think this is going to be an off season for the Patriots like we've never seen before. They've kind of been that fantasy team that you love having in Dynasty. It's a set it and forget it, but it's pretty dang boring because every year the same thing happens. Now all of a sudden we have cap space. We have a chance to basically rebuild the franchise however they want it to be built. So I'm actually pretty stoked it happened this way. And as weird as it is for Patriots fans, I think it's good for us going into 2021 to have that kind of bulletin board material, because for certain all you're going to hear is it wasn't you, it was Brady. And these are still athletes. These are still pros that are going to take that to heart and hopefully do something with it.
Bob, what do you think?
I agree with Mike. The only difference was I wanted to see the Patriots versus Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. That would have been ideal.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the two of them clashing. I don't think they would have shook hands. No, I am completely on board with what Mike said.
That's a fun little what if of like, if that had happened, what would the 50-yard line meetup at the end, what would that have looked like? It's really, I think the thing that I thought about is almost like this Sunday would be like watching your ex get married. Is it like you were invited to the wedding and having to watch your ex get married? Is that kind of what this weekend's like for you guys?
That's a really awkward analogy. And not for me.
That's where it's at.
Yeah.
I just want to say that if I was invited to my ex's wedding, I wouldn't go.
Yeah. Well, you could not watch the Super Bowl, I guess. So I don't know.
I sent out a tweet. No,
go ahead. No, please.
I sent out a tweet where the last weekend or the weekend before, It was honestly the first time I got to see a whole Tampa Bay game this year, because obviously I watched the Red Zone. And it made me feel like I was watching a Patriots game. Just watching Tom, the way he was moving people around the field, watching how he went down to score at the end of the game. It brought back so many memories. I was touched by it. And it was nice to be able to look back and see what we had as a franchise to compared to everyone else. There's nobody else that has what we went through the last 20 years.
No, 100% right. And so let's go back away from, we didn't even mention Gronk there, but obviously that's, he's part of that too. But let's go away from the Bucks. Let's go back to the Patriots, because we don't want to talk about the Patriots here today. And 2020 didn't end up going the way that I guess you would obviously hope for it to go. The 45-0, I believe it was, game against the Chargers looked like, okay, here we go. This is time for the Patriots to move forward. And then, I think that's about when Cam Newton got hurt or got sick. Mm-hmm. What was it like, I guess, as a Patriots fan in 2020, watching this team, this new identity? And then, just talk a little bit about 2020, and then we're going to get into the offseason. Mike, I'll start with you.
So honestly, this was probably the best year for me to get involved in fantasy Twitter, get involved in live streams, because the fact is I was so busy just kind of doing my thing that I wasn't so invested in the Patriots. I was going live. I was doing Sleeper Wire on Sundays, trying to do the timeline takeovers, that by the time everything was settled down, by the time I hit the couch, they were already 2 quarters into what was looking like an ugly football game. So what I will say is this is probably the first year that I was the least invested in the Patriots, and that actually has nothing to do with Tom Brady leaving. It has everything to do with just the situation that I found myself in, where, trying to keep up this kind of side gig that we're all doing took me away from that emotional investment. And like Bob said, I had on Red Zone more than anything else. So the entire year felt different. Now, of course, what I liked about it, as strange as this may sound, because it was a pretty poor year, was it was also the first time in a very long time that the Patriots had regular season games that mattered. We didn't really have to pay attention to the first 16. You kind of knew what the end result was. It was going to be an AFC East title. It was going to be either a bye or a home game in the first round. You kind of knew the story was written. So this was the first time we've actually had to sweat out regular season games. It was the first time we had to actually look at the schedule, and it was the first time that we weren't heavy favorites against teams like the Bills, against teams like the Dolphins. Even the Jets were on a run at the end that I thought they were maybe going to drop that game. I wish they had, but that's neither here nor there. So I will say I really didn't feel an attachment to this team. So it definitely took a lot of the sting of what was a disappointing season out for me personally. I just didn't have that really bummer of a season, because so much good was happening around me that the Patriots falling off, I guess the timing was kind of perfect.
Faith, what do you think? How was 2020?
Like Mike, I didn't get to spend a lot of time watching football, but for different reasons. I work in elections, and so there was a solid 3 weeks straight that I worked 3 weeks straight without a day off. The amount of Sundays that I had off were few and far between, basically, during the season. So by the time I either got home from work or could tune in, it was either the game was over or it was halfway through. And honestly, my attention was elsewhere. I didn't put much focus into football at all. I think the first football game that I really watched was sometime in November after the election, simply because I was either working late or I was tired, and I would catch Patriots scores, and nothing really excited me to go, you know what, I really need to catch this game. I was like, eventually I knew. I'm 34. The Patriots have been winning for as long as I've been a fan. I knew eventually this was going to come to an end, and like Mike, the fact that it happened in 2020 when I had something else to occupy me, instead of focusing on how much they were not being the Patriots team that I knew, was very helpful, or else I would have been very sad.
Bob, I mean, like, you've been around the fantasy industry here for a little while, and like, we're used to Patriots teams. You want a piece of somebody in the Patriots offense. Like, this was a year where there weren't a whole lot of Patriots that you really wanted in your lineup. Like some Jacoby Myers there for a little while, maybe some Damian Harris, but just from a fantasy perspective, like, definitely way more disappointing than we thought. I mean, is that kind of, do you think some of where I'm going with that is, do you think some of what we saw with Cam Newton and his deficiencies had to do with the people around him, or do you think vice versa, or do you think all of it was just bad?
It was just bad. I was heavily invested myself in Cam Newton this year. His price in all the Dynasty leagues was very low in the offseason. I took him in the Scott Fish Bowl. I think he got me a -17 one week. So I was better off starting Scott Zolak.
You still won, though, if I remember correctly, Bob.
I do think I did win that week still. But yeah, the fantasy, there was no fantasy relevant players for the Patriots. You had a plug-in once in a while, but you couldn't play any of them. And it's been that way for a long time. I mean, yes, you could always start Brady, but, Edelman, yeah. Other than that, you couldn't pick a running back in that backfield.
So let's fast forward then. Like, okay, so let's go to 2021, because Mike was right. Mike brought it up. Like, this is a point where there's just a hard reset. I mean, there's when you start turning over the different pieces of the offseason and you start looking at what the Patriots could potentially do, there are a lot of positives, because you turn over the salary cap. There's $68 million under the salary cap right now. Now they've got to resign Joe Thuney or David Andrews. They got some offensive line guys that they're going to have to bring in. There's some defensive line guys maybe that are a little bit older that they got to make some decisions on. But that defense was pretty good, and they've got some of the guys coming back. There are James White and Rex Burkhead and guys like Demir Bird and obviously Cam Newton, who are not under contract anymore. So you're almost completely wiping the slate clean from a skill position perspective. What do you think, I guess, like, as you start turning over those things, what do you think the idea is for quarterback specifically on this team? Mike, we'll start with you.
It's Jimmy Garoppolo. I would stake my reputation on it. The fact is, you have two things working in the direction that you want. Number one is San Francisco is being very overt that they don't want Garoppolo as their quarterback. As I understand it, the cap hit is fairly low, so he is movable. This isn't a poison pill contract that you're looking at like a Carson Wentz might be. Number two is, I think that Belichick wants to go with the story that he's always been thriving for, which is Garoppolo was the play all along, and he wants to win with Jimmy G. So I believe some way or somehow you've heard whispers of them calling on Kirk Cousins. I was actually just talking to Scott Fish before I jumped on here. He doesn't think it's going to happen. But somehow I think San Francisco turns over the quarterback position, and Garoppolo is the one who ends up here. It just makes too much sense. I think that gets done in some way, shape, or form. And I think it gets done in the way that they restructure his contract to stretch it out, put some more on like those 5-year deals so you're not really getting hit. But I think that's honestly what's going to happen. It's not a very Patriot move. Pat, what's up, buddy? It's not really a Patriots move to be getting a second-tier quarterback like a Mac Jones at number 15. As much as they value that skill set, they value the high completion percentage guy. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see Jimmy G coming back. I think you're going to see him on a fairly cap-friendly deal because that's what the Patriots do. And I think Belichick's going to do his darndest to make him a winning quarterback, which honestly he has been during his career. You can talk about how he's been for your fantasy team. You can talk about how, maybe his numbers aren't all pro type Hall of Fame numbers. But the fact is, what you can't argue is that San Francisco is a Super Bowl contender with him and an absolute trash team without him. I mean, that's just a statement of fact. His record as a starter is insane. So I would legitimately put the chances that Jimmy Garoppolo, sounds crazy because he's on another roster, I'd put it at about 75% that he's the Pats starting quarterback week 1.
Faith, how open are you to a reunion with Jimmy G?
Well, since Bill Belichick likes to say we're on to Cincinnati, we're on to 2021, and I would not be opposed to a reunion with Jimmy G. I mean, have you seen him? But honestly, when Jimmy G got cut, I was bummed to say, because it seemed like, because he got cut the same year, or traded the same year that what's his face went to Indy, and I was like, okay, we have no backups. Great, cool, awesome, yay. Jimmy knows the system. Jimmy knows the players. Jimmy knows the plays. I think Jimmy would be a good fit.
Bob, and Faith mentions another interesting reunion possibility there in Jacoby Brissett. Are you interested in a reunion of any type, or are you hoping
the Jimmy G one? Mike makes a great point with the Jimmy G. It would be a great fit. Obviously, yes, he knows the system. He knows how it works there. I wouldn't mind that at all. But I am on the Mac Jones train. I want them to spend the equity and get him. His precision passing is exactly what Belichick needs. Even his photos. Look at his photos. He's completely a Tom Brady. He's got the dad bod already. They will turn him around. He'll go to the TB12 State Institute that's right next to Foxborough still. He'll get himself into shape. He'll find himself, I don't know, who's the next up-and-coming model. I mean, maybe Steffi Smalls can help us out, who the models are nowadays. But he's right on the same track as Brady.
Okay, wow. So Mac Jones, Tom Brady, basically same guy.
Same guy, interchangeable.
Yeah,
interchangeable.
I like how one topless photo has Mac Jones in the Hall of Fame.
That basically is all you need is a dad bod.
You have to throw that tweet in there.
I'm still stuck on Tom Brady having a dad bod. That's not what I. That's not a dad bod.
When he
You
came
need
out,
to Google a 1998 Tom Brady draft picture.
Oh, it was bad.
Okay.
Was it 98 or 99?
Rookie Tom Brady had a dad bod. Tom Brady now does not have a dad bod.
Okay. He's got to start somewhere. Mac Jones is starting there.
Mac Jones will be shredded with 6 Super Bowls, according to Bob, by 2041, if my math's correct.
He's going to be.
Let's not go that route. Just
avocado smoothie or whatever it is that Tom Brady's big thing is now. What's it?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, avocado smoothies and concussion water,
so
he doesn't ever hit his head. Yeah.
In what, Mike?
Concussion water. Was it Brady or Russell Wilson who was on the concussion water?
The reason I'm saying to go after the rookie quarterback is that is the formula to win in the NFL right now. Mm-hmm. You spend little money on your quarterback, and then you can spend everywhere else. And if Belichick can spend everywhere else besides quarterback, he's going to have a great team on that field.
Shit, so I mean, I see where you're going with that. Now, the thing is, though, I think Garoppolo comes back at a more cap-friendly deal.
That's fine.
And I don't think there's a lot that you're looking at on the market right now. When you're talking about this $58 million that we're sitting on, I don't know where else you're necessarily going to put it. So I think that it allows them that latitude. Now, what I will say was, I was with you, Bob, until last night. And I got to thinking, because we got on the topic with Tua when we had Ryan McDowell and Sal was in the chat. We got on the topic of Tua. And what scares me is a comment they made about Tua, which is Alabama didn't miss a beat without him. Now, Tua looked like a world beater, and now he comes into the NFL, and he certainly looks like he's struggling. Certainly not the player I think that Miami thought they were investing in. Now, my big concern is when you have two quarterbacks that really excel in the system, and honestly, we're talking three because if you remember, Jalen Hurts prior to transferring was also on that track, right? So you're looking at Jalen Hurts, Tua, and Mac Jones all looking like first-round pick quarterbacks. Now you get to the NFL, Jalen Hurts looks like he can't hold the ball for more than 5 minutes. I mean, record amount of fumbles in his throwing motion, needs a ton of work. Tua looks like he's struggling. And now we're talking about the third guy in that line of succession of those dynasty college teams. Are we really certain that Mac Jones is the number 15 overall pick, or would we be saying the same thing about a Kyle Trask, for example, if he happened to have gone to Alabama instead of Florida? And we hate Kyle Trask now because of what he did in Florida, but Alabama's system seems to be pumping these guys out. So honestly, I was with you literally up until last night. Like I would have been saying the same thing you're saying, but then as it got in my head and I see two quarterbacks that I don't love in Hurts and Tua, do I really want the third person on that train? Do I really want the caboose of that dynasty train being the face of my franchise for 5 years? I don't, because I think that realistically, I don't see a lot of elite skills other than the accuracy and the record-setting QBR. And I think a system can do that just as well as a quarterback can. And that's what makes me very nervous. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying personally, I hope it doesn't for that reason.
That actually, you make a great point there, and I listened to the whole stream. I thought, but I guess I missed that. That is a great point, and I'm gonna have to rethink that.
So sorry, Bob.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
I have no problem drafting Mac Jones. Do I think we need to bring in a rookie quarterback? Yes, but I also think that rookie quarterback needs to sit at the feet of somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who is experienced, somebody who has not only had a year or two in the NFL, but spent a year with the Patriots themselves. Because just like Tua, just like everybody else, they get shoved into the NFL, and the NFL and college are very different. And so quarterbacks who do well in college doesn't always translate into doing well in the NFL. And so I think having a rookie backup to sit and learn would be a great thing, but I also still think we need an experienced QB to lead us next year.
And to that point, there were a lot of reports that the Patriots were in on Matt Stafford, that they could be exploring the trade market. And in fact, I read an article from Tony Pauline. He said that the sense from the Senior Bowl is that the Patriots will look to free agency or the trade market for a quarterback, which could support, the Jimmy G theory, obviously. Now, all of that, whoever ends up there, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins, whoever it ends up at the helm of quarterback, they've got Josh McDaniels that's going to be their offensive coordinator, who certainly has had a lot of success as an offensive coordinator. Obviously, if I ask you scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable you feel with Bill Belichick, it's an 11. What about Josh McDaniels? Scale of 1 to 10. Let's just toss it around. Scale of 1 to 10. How much confidence do you have in Josh McDaniels as an OC?
11.
Bob, go with you first.
11. I mean, I'm completely confident in him.
Mike?
I despise Josh Daniels. Josh McDaniels, I despise him. I think that realistically he was, I don't want to go as far as saying Adam Gase, that'll be insulting. But I think he made his name off of a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think you see a lot of offensive coordinators that have that MO. I was much happier when we had Charlie Weiss. I think that McDaniel honestly isn't quite where I want him to be. And I think that what he hasn't done is adapt to the personnel. And I think that's where the Patriots struggled this year. So I don't want to put him in the Gase category. I don't want to say he's trash. I certainly don't think that's the case. But I'm more of a 5 with McDaniel because I haven't seen him do anything without Tom Brady as a head coach. as an offensive coordinator. Even this year, what I didn't see realistically early in the year is enough adaptation of the offense to fit Cam Newton. And that's what I think I wanted to see from the offense coordinator. And when we talk about, I see the comments about games won. I understand that a lot of it was done through improvisation. And let's be honest, a lot of it was done through the defense, which has nothing to do with Josh McDaniels. So I just don't see this guy as somebody who has deserved the accolades that he got. But the beauty of it is one of us is going to be right, and we're going to find out next year, because I do think they're going to load up on weapons. And let's be honest, I think we can all say that if he doesn't do it next year, we're all on the Mike train here with Josh McDaniels isn't any good. And I will be as embarrassed as I was about the Bucs of the 2000 Washington team if he does. So we're going to find out. I just don't have a reason to feel confident right now.
It's tough to develop an offense when your quarterback is skipping the ball into receivers over and over and over again, in fairness.
Sorry, go ahead, Faith.
Go ahead, Mike. Finish your statement.
I think what I'm worried about is, granted, Cam's throwing wasn't where it needed to be, but what I didn't see is a lot of, when you have these run first offenses, a lot of these dynamic plays, a lot of these jet sweeps, a lot of these misdirections. Like, he had a few gimmick plays. There were always end around flea flickers. Like, that just seems to be his thing. But what I didn't see him doing was taking the pieces he had and turning it into a modern offense. And to your point, Calvin, when your quarterback is skipping into the ground, well, what did Peterson do with Jalen Hurts? Mid-season, after an injury, he shaped an offense for a guy that basically took the strengths of him and moved forward. What I didn't see is a lot of innovation and adjustment. And what I didn't see is, yes, he was skipping the ball into the ground, and still we're doing a large amount, when Edelman got hurt, of 5-step drops with a quarterback who clearly doesn't have deep ball accuracy. Why didn't we move this forward? Why don't I see the improvement? Why don't I see these tight ends, Asiasi, mixed in, and Dalton Keene? Why don't I see the assets we put together moving forward? And why haven't I seen them develop an offensive talent for the last 10 years? The only hit they've had where they've made a person better is a converted quarterback to wide receiver who honestly had the grit to do it himself. So what I don't see is N'Keal Harry becoming a player. I don't see them using him the right way. I don't see him developing the young tight ends, and that is what scares me more than anything. I want to see someone draw up plays for the personnel they have, and I haven't seen McDaniel do that as of yet. Sorry, I feel passionate.
No, that's awesome. That's exactly what we're looking for right there. Faith, basically, do you like Bob's opinion better or Mike's opinion better? That's basically the question.
So, yes, I see both sides, and personally, I love Josh McDaniel, but it's one of those things that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Josh can draw up perfect plays, but if Cam's just not performing them, then it's not Josh's fault that Cam just isn't meeting the mark or isn't doing any of that. But I just want to state, for what it's worth, last year was kind of terribly offensive-wise and just all over the map. But we also get Matt Patricia back this year. And so whatever role Matt has to play and adding – it's kind of like getting the gang back together. So I'm interested to see how Matt returning, his role plays into Josh McDaniels and the offense and how it all just fits together.
Well, we did see the first role he played, which has made it so Matt Stafford wanted nothing to do with our football team. So big plus there, I guess.
But if you remember, Josh McDaniels failed as head coach in Denver. And so it's almost like our assistant coaches or OCs or DCs, whatever, they're destined to always be a bridesmaid, never the bride.
The reason Stafford didn't want to come to New England is Matt Patricia.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I just said. Him showing up is why Stafford didn't want to join. Yeah, no, everyone's blaming Belichick. Oh, it's not fun. I'm like, no, Matt Patricia's here, and Matt Stafford hates Matt Patricia. It's a pretty simple equation. It's 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. The step one of Patricia coming here cost the Stafford quite possibly.
Yes.
Step two could be a stud defensive group, but step one is concerning to say the least.
Okay, quick yes or no. Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Sure.
Yeah, I love Fitzpatrick.
He's got to make the rounds in the AFC East. The Patriots are the only team he hasn't played for.
And you probably haven't heard of this, but he went to college here too. I don't know if you knew that. They don't talk about it much.
Did he go to college?
Did he go to Harvard?
Like
that's what I heard.
He might have gone to Harvard.
I have no memory of any of this.
Maybe Boston University.
I'll have to look it up.
MIT. I don't remember. They don't mention it.
MIT. Yeah.
Usually this is where I'd ask Bob to fact check us.
He went to Harvard.
He
went to Harvard.
He's wicked smart.
He went to Harvard.
He knew how to park a car.
Park a car.
Yes. Jameis Winston.
No.
God, no.
Mm-mm.
No.
Belichick would cut him week 3.
No.
That's honestly what I thought about Cam, though. I was like, how
crab
is he going
legs
to put up with this attitude?
Oh, no,
Cam's
Cam's
crab legs. You got lobster
Beautiful.
claws.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get him in trouble here.
Lobster's more well. It depends on where he's crab. Actually, still crab from Publix. It wasn't a high quality crab down here.
Where else are you going to go for seafood analysis when it comes to Jameis Winston? Right here. This is your spot. Okay, it would cost a lot, but would you be willing to pay the price for Deshaun Watson?
Willing, yeah. You don't have the horses,
Yes.
so the problem is you can't.
There's no chance. There's no chance Belichick would ever pay that.
And you just don't have it. I mean, your picks don't come close to anything the Jets can offer. You can't even keep up with Carolina. So the problem you have is that the teams going for Deshaun Watson already have more assets than you do, right. And you'll lose that bidding war even if you tried to. I agree with you, Bob. I don't think that Belichick goes all in that format. However, even if you wanted to, you still lose. Yeah. You don't have what it takes.
Yeah, if they weren't able to, I guess, give up enough to get Matt Stafford, I guess it kind of tells you maybe they wouldn't have enough to get Deshaun Watson. But let's move on from the quarterback. Obviously, somebody's going to fill that role, and I think we at least, most of you guys here have some faith that Josh McDaniels is going to at least develop a competent level of offense. I like Damian Harris. Damian Harris really showed me some things this year. I thought he was a really good running back. Of all the running backs that they've had, I mean, he seemed to be the most dynamic that I've seen in a Patriots backfield in a while. Like they've spent some draft picks on guys that I think this is the one that looks to me like the one that, if given a full-time role, he could do pretty well in it. Bob, do you think there's any chance he gets a full-time role in this backfield next year?
No, nobody ever gets a full-time role in this backfield. Somebody, whether Sony gets some touches or they bring another veteran in, there's nobody that will ever have a full-time role in a Belichick offense. It might seem like it for a little bit, but we got Jonas Gray for one game. We get I can't think of them. Yeah, Ben Jarvis. Ben Jarvis might have been the last one that we had. Yeah, he might have been the last one. I mean, before that was Corey Dillon. I mean, the
last one was LeGarrette Blount. I think was our last bell cow.
Yeah, and that was still only first and second down. I mean, you had Shane Vereen coming out on third down.
Oh, Shane Vereen.
Yeah, I think you're right though. That's what happened with Harris too.
Right there.
Yeah, I mean, if you got Harris going, first and second down, they'll either re-sign James White on a cheap deal because he wants to stay here, or might bring in J.J. Taylor, who they have just kicking around on the practice squad, and he's like a copy. But no, there will never be you can't trust Belichick in his backs.
Mike, you agree?
So sort of. I think he's right that there'll be a third down back. I think there'll be a pass catching back. However, I do think that Damian Harris will get the LeGarrette Blount role. I think that he will get let's say 17 carries, which honestly, with his skill set and with the way this team runs the ball, that'll be good enough for your fantasy team. So if we're talking fantasy, I am absolutely investing in Damian Harris. He is my favorite late round target. I actually just traded Juju to get Michael Pittman and Damian Harris. And, pro tip, when you're in an analyst league and you know what team the person cheers for, don't trade that person players from their team. That is always, you're never going to get quite the value. So I had recommended him as a throw-in just to tip the scales. Honestly, it was the target because I think what you're looking at is a pretty solid 8 to 15 points a week, which realistically in the game we play is pretty good. So I agree. I want it to be J.J. Taylor. I think Bob brings up a great name. I think Harris and Taylor would be an excellent combo with Sony really filling in that backup role. But Taylor's so small, man. I mean, he is so small. But with Burkhead out of his contract, with White out of his contract, man, I'll tell you the name that floats around in my head that would be the perfect complement. And I don't know if they're going to let him go, but Jamal Williams would be the greatest fit for this team as a combo with Damian Harris. They would be unbelievable together. I don't think that happens. In fact, I don't think Green Bay lets him walk out the door. However, that would be really my dream backfield as a fan. But no, I think Harris. I think Harris does enough. I mean, I think realistically, when you look at it, it would be no different than Josh Jacobs' role with the Raiders, for example. I mean, that dude can't catch worth a dang either. So I think you're looking at that type of role, which I think is probably good enough for your running back too.
Faith, I'm going to ask you about wide receivers because that's an area, obviously. Look, I actually really like Jacoby Myers. I'm maybe one of Jacoby Myers' biggest fans. He can't be your best wide receiver. I mean, he's got to be a guy that's third or fourth, in your pecking order. So where do you expect them to pick up receivers for whoever the quarterback is? Do you think it's going to come through the draft? Do you think it's going to come through free agency? Are they going to make some trades? Where do you think this goes at the wide receiver spot?
So to read the mind of Bill Belichick is like trying to read the mind of God. You just don't know what's going to happen. Because we could sit here and go, you know what? I think they're going to, I don't know that any of us would have thought that New England would have picked up Cam Newton on a 1-year deal. I don't know about these two, but I never would have pictured it in 1,000 years. Simply because knowing how Bill Belichick feels about attitudes and personalities, and then knowing Cam's attitude and personality, I was like, never would have fit, never going to happen. And yet 2020. So honestly, I could see a mixture, maybe picking up one or two of them on UFAs and waivers or trades. But then also I know how Bill likes to shape the future. So I could see picking up somebody in the third or fourth too.
Bob, call your shot. What do you think is going to happen in the free agency or the draft? What's a big splashy move that the Patriots are going to make, if any?
Whoever's left on day 3. Let's see. I don't even know who all the free agents are. I've been too busy. Let's see.
I mean, you got guys like Corey Davis, you got Kenny Galladay, you got Chris Godwin, you've got Juju Smith-Schuster, you've got Allen Robinson. I mean, there's a lot of names out there, and for a team with $68 million in cap, there's a lot of flexibility if they wanted to make a move and improve the weapons.
It's going to primarily be on the defensive side. They may make a move to add to the offensive line, maybe, but I don't see them bringing in a receiver. Any of the skill players, I don't see them bringing in a big flashy name. They're not at that point. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
You said big flashy names, and I was like, Dola's a free agent. What's the chances they bring Dola back?
No.
Gosh, if they do that,
he can go to South Beach.
Go back to South Beach.
You just want Amendola and Jimmy Garoppolo here, in New England together. That would be perfect, right there.
Listen, if I can't have Tom Brady in New England, I need some of my boys back together. Edelman never left, so.
Mike, last word. last word on Patriots, and then we're gonna cut out of here. What do you think? Is there a big offensive? They got to do something. What do you think? Do you like Boston rules comment here that we maybe get Chris Godwin? What do you think?
I mean, I like the idea of Godwin, and I do think what you're going to see is you're going to see an offseason that likens I want to say it was 2007, the year they got Adalius Thomas, the year that they were out of character and picked up some weapons. The fact is right now what this team needs is they have a few glaring needs. They need a defensive tackle. What happened was we were rolling on Malcolm Brown, then we got Danny Shelton, and we didn't replace that, and we were gutted up the middle. I think you're good on the outsides, and I think your secondary is honestly spectacular. Rumor has it that your two opt-outs, Patrick Chung and Dante Hightower, are coming back, which will really help that second-level rush defense. That is a huge need that's going to be filled just by those two guys opting back in. What you're seeing from Uche, what you're seeing from Winovich, your pass rush looks pretty solid. And Kyle Duggar, man, that kid is a player. That kid's a missile on the field. Now, what I love about this year is it plays into the Patriots' hands for two reasons. Number one, they have $58 million. But number two, what they normally go for is that, and Bob actually hit it as a joke, but I think this year is going to be money, is that secondary free agent market. So what you have right now is with the salary cap shrinking, with the fact that you have people that are going to have to make cuts, what you're going to find is Bill Belichick is going to leverage his cap space to get names you're probably not expecting. So you might be looking at, let's just kind of throw some fun names out there because we're here, right? Amari Cooper is a name that realistically you could absorb the contract. Godwin, Golladay, Juju are the ones that you look at. But what Belichick does normally is he plays that real life Kevin Costner from Draft Day role where he has you painted in a corner. He knows you're in cap jail. He takes advantage of those teams like the Rams, for example, who are kind of stuck, right? Like these teams that are going to be looking for some overhead. So what your splash is going to be, Calvin, is not a name that is currently on the free agent market, but the Patriots will be big players in the cut market. And what they'll do is they're going to be that person that you hate in your fantasy auction. They're going to be that person where everyone has $4 left and they have 25 just popping out names that you didn't think of. And they're just betting $4 because you only have 3 left, or they're betting 5 because you have 4. That's what you're going to see. And I think you're going to see Belichick truly taking advantage of the system this year more than anything. So it's going to be that secondary market. But I will guarantee you that N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers will not be your top wide receivers. I do believe that Asiasi and Keene are your tight ends. I do believe Harris is your running back. I've already told you Garoppolo is your quarterback, but they will get 1, if not 2 wide receivers to fill in this role. They will get a defensive tackle. And honestly, if they put together just those pieces with $58 million is more than enough to get that done, that will absolutely fill the need that you're looking for. And if you're not certain about the tight ends that you have, Asiasi and Keene, the name to look out for is Gerald Everett or David Njoku. Those are the two that if you're not certain will end up. One of those two will be on the Pats.
Lee bringing the fire here at the very end with some Wonderlic analysis. Look, and he brings in Fitzpatrick. We talked about a pretty smart quarterback there who went to some school in the Boston area. I don't know, somewhere up there in the northeast. You may have heard of it. Yeah, that's not bad. Let me just push back on that a little bit. This is the last thing. I got to go. I got the Broncos one next. But push back.
We're just the pregame.
As a Patriots fan, at some point, just picking up off the trash heap, don't you get tired of that? Like, don't you want them to go out and actually spend some of this money, their draft capital, whatever it is? Like, stop trading back in the draft, start moving up in the draft, something?
So that they did the 1 year. They did the 1 year, and if you remember, it was Chandler Jones and Dante Hightower, and that worked out really well last I checked. You got 2 stud Pro Bowlers. They traded up, and they made the moves. I mean, the problem is realistically, and Bob, I think you and I talked about this in a chat once. Belichick does not deal well with these freelance stud athletes that the NFL is going towards. He's looking for that smart player. That's how we end up with Jordan Richards at safety, because he's smart and went to Stanford. And what he needs to do is really adjust to being these players, because as a coach, there is nobody better. There is nobody better than Bill Belichick as a coach. Anyone who says otherwise, honestly, needs to read a book about football. But Bill Belichick as a GM is outsmarting himself, and he's always trading that dollar for 4 quarters. And that's how we get ourselves in trouble. He's not a bad drafter. His value by pick is spectacular. He just doesn't swing for the fences. And absolutely what this team needs more than anything is athletes, not these players that fit a role. They need athletes. They need difference makers. And that's what this team is missing. But they're not as far off as the record would entail. But that's what he has to do. He has to go get an athlete. And I'll tell you, the Patrick Surtain, the Micah Parsons drafts, those are the ones that get my juices flowing, because those are playmakers I would love to see here. I mean, you get Gilmore and Surtain on the outside. Forget about it. You don't even need safeties. Stack the box and you'll be fine. But that's what he doesn't lean towards, and I hope that's a change this year, because that's what we need, is those freaks.
I think that's a great last word. I gotta cut it out, but I think it's a great last word. I think this is going to be, of all the teams that I'm most excited to see what they do in this offseason, I think the Patriots are definitely easily top 3 on what's their team going to look like on day 1 in 2021, because it's going to look way different, I think, than it does now, or at least, it certainly has the potential to be. A lot of storylines about it. I'm so happy and excited that you guys were able to join today. Faith, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us. Make sure you guys are following her, and when she releases this new Dynasty article that you talked about up top, hopefully we'll get a chance to promote that and tweet that out. At Daddy's Home, you can find him basically anywhere. Like, if you just open your Twitter, I think he becomes part of the initial Twitter package of who you have to follow, and then he helps you get 1,000 followers immediately. And then
Twitter whore.
Yeah, and then Bob, thank you so much. Sure. I appreciate you coming on and helping put all this together and everything that you do behind the scenes. So for these guys, make sure you're following them. For Matt, for the rest of the Dynasty Viper crew, we're gone.